Good afternoon, brothers and sorors, brothers and sisters. Um, I am very much delighted to be able to have an opportunity to present a little bit more information related to the Rosicrucian teachings and really what modern science has begun to recognize, observe, and validate this kind of ancient primordial wisdom. And in many ways, I think we both all may find it quite fascinating that somehow, again, the source of this knowledge is what people call the primordial tradition, the Rosicrucian teachings, being an expression of that tradition, that somehow, those illumined individuals who were able to perceive these things and organize them in such a way that they could be shared with us as students and seekers, literally thousands of years, and quite literally, before modern science has even begun to scratch kind of the surface of some of the realities that these teachings share and reveal to us. So I'd like to say, for those of us who like a little bit of science without mysticism, that's what this is particularly for. It's not going to be there are no equations. And some of the stuff we're going to cover today, it's hard to find some stuff without equations, but I think we managed to find some stuff that tells the story without throwing unruly math kind of equations into it. But something I would like to preface, kind of going into the kind of the topics we're going to cover today, and that kind of is drawn from a phrase that is uttered by one of the officers in a Rosicrucian lodge or chapter convocation. And I don't know how many folks who are on this this video today, have attended a lodge or chapter convocation of the Rosicrucian order. That's members only, obviously. And the lodge and chapter convocation, which is the same, is a bit different from the Pennaeus convocation in terms of what's the ritual that is used. Both formats are extremely rich, but in the one that I want to draw your attention to a phrase that is in the lodge and chapter convocation ritual, and it's kind of the Rosicrucian ontology of creation, and it's put in very symbolic, but at the same time very direct terms. And it talks about being and being expanded, and complex became its manifestations, etc. And then it talks about life, and then ultimately sentient creatures. And then there's a phrase which I want to particularly draw our attention to today, and it talks about, it alludes to the glories of the universe and all the things that's kind of fall under that umbrella. And it uses and assigned it dimension, MIND, assigned it dimension. Now, all of us should individually reflect on that. To me, among its meanings, and you may find many, so don't be limited by any other person's understanding. But our mind, brain, they basically define what we realize of the universe. And with that in mind, keeping with that thought there, is recognizing that from a kind of physics point of view, through our 5 physical senses, we perceive but a tiny, tiny, tiny portion of the entire spectrum of cosmic kind of vibration and energies that even modern science recognizes. Right? So literally, and we can see this quite apparently, even in a very limited sense, in other animals, right? Other animals see what we can't see. They recognize what is perceived as light, those things that are in the ultraviolet spectrum. As an example, bees do, right? They've demonstrated this lots of times in laboratory experiments, right? We know that dogs, as an example, have an ability to sense chemicals in the air at about several thousand times the sensitivity of humans. Right? And there's lots of examples. Actually, believe it or not, there are shrimp, as I recall, shrimp that have about 11 times kind of the visual kind of apparatus in terms of complexity and different kind of radiations of light that it's able to perceive as compared to the human eye. So speaking of seeing again, we can look at an eagle, right, or falcon, a bird of prey that is able to see things thousands of feet away that are small creatures, which we would never perceive. So, but that's just an example of really our physical senses are quite limited and they create reality for us. Right? There's all sorts of energy we are totally not cognizant of. Even the room that we are seated in this moment, wherever you are, right? There are literally millions of radio waves passing through those walls and through your body. Right. So yes, if you had somehow built into your head a kind of receiver, well, you would be able to hear the FM radio station that's playing right now. And that signal is available and passing through the room you're sitting in. But we do not have the ability to perceive it through our senses. And without the modern tools that have been developed, we wouldn't even know of its existence. So if you look at the development of our senses, right, and our science basically has extended the range of our senses, but the same five senses, right? We've created instruments that allow us to see distant galaxies. The light is always striking the Earth at all times. On a clear night, it's visible, except our eyes are not sensitive enough to perceive it. So telescopes have been developed that are able to, in effect, amplify the impact of those photons that have traveled, in some cases, for billions of years to reach the Earth. All right, so we have microscopes that allow us also to extend the sense of vision down to the subatomic. Right, electron microscopes, et cetera, take us into the subatomic realms. And there are various other apparatus that kind of do the same, but slightly different technology, but will take us down to virtually being able to see impressions of single atoms. Right? All of these things exist. It is just we can't perceive them. We've designed tools or instruments to extend our five physical senses. But that doesn't mean that that's all there is. It is only an extension of those particular five senses. As an example, another example is that if you look at a number of animals, birds being one that's well known, but other animals as well, have a magnetic sense. They are able to actually find their way back home based on certain magnetic profile of where they traveled from and where they're seeking as a destination. All right, so that magnetic information is all around us. We do not consciously perceive it. Though in humans, actually, there's a vestige of that capacity still exists in a kind of a vestigial way, because they've done very interesting experiments, kind of putting people in laboratories and changing the electromagnetic fields around them while measuring brain activity. And even though one is not consciously aware of the changes in the kind of magnetic field that's been kind of created about the subject in these kind of experimental chambers, they don't consciously realize it, but the brain is reacting. So on a subconscious level, the information is there. Again, the point really being here, just because these things are not available to our five physical senses or even the extensions of those senses doesn't mean other things don't exist. It's foolish to think to the contrary, though modern science generally has taken the viewpoint that if we can't measure it by extending our five physical senses in some fashion, it's not worth investigating. And unfortunately for many, many scientists, it's more of a human trait, but it manifests in scientists, is they get a bit arrogant and say, well, it doesn't exist. It's meaningless. It's just made up in your head. So if you keep that as the backdrop, right? So our brains, our minds have created the experience of the universe that we experience, right? Mind assigns it dimension. That creates the qualities that we perceive, but it is not the entirety by any means of what is. So we have these instruments that extend that, but in modern science is generally, when I say modern, the last 200 kind of years worth of science, has said, well, if we can't measure it with our instruments, we're going to deny its existence and to some degree, unfortunately, attack people who purport that there are things contrary to their point of view. But nonetheless, that's kind of the state of things. And with time, obviously, our scientific instruments evolve, our understanding, therefore the world evolves, and we take in new things. And this kind of sets the stage for three topics particularly that I want to talk about today. One of them is looking at Rosicrucian healing techniques. Some of these is going in a kind of very general way from a scientific point of view, kind of modern science, kind of, let's say knowledge of science. Also kind of look at a time. We're not going to devote as much to space, and I'll tell you why as we get to that. But time, and lastly, when we look at the notion of the spirit vibration, right? So the Rosicrucian teachings assert some pretty profound and kind of not conventional wisdom things about those three subjects, right? Ability for humans to kind of heal through touch, and there's energies that flow out of our bodies, and we can direct within our bodies as well as outside of our bodies. Secondarily, saying that time is not what we perceive it to be, nor space. And similarly saying that everything is that we see manifest is based on the various rates of vibration of this underlying energy, which the Rosicrucian terminology is spirit energy, not to be confused with spirits or spiritual, but the terminology that Rosicrucian teachings kind of adopted is spirit energy, right? And saying it's an all-pervasive energy, and everything is comprised of it. And the difference between things is simply their rates of vibration of this energy. And that's what we perceive to be the differences. So I want to kind of delve into that, and I'm going to do a screen share here, which I'm going to work just right. And hopefully it does. And we're gonna go do that. So here we go. And I'm hoping it's coming across to you without any kind of odd things on the screen. It is okay. Thank you, Karen. So the kind of simple title: Modern Physics and Rosicrucian Teachings on Healing, Time, and Spirit Energy. And there's a part 3 to this, but it won't be today, which we'll get into another one of these fascinating Rosicrucian assertions, teachings, etc., and looking at now how science is begrudgingly kind of catching up. So let's look at technology. Come on. Technology, don't fail me now. Okay, so Rosicrucian healing techniques. Want to talk about this, no matter kind of where you are, whether you're in the kind of earliest, atria, or your, further degrees in Rosicrucian studies, you've encountered a reference, or about to, if you haven't already, to how there's an energy that's kind of present in our bodies, and how we can direct that energy inside as well as outside of our bodies. And use it to help relieve ailments in others and in ourselves. Of course, we also, when we're really introduced this, which comes a little bit later with the deep dive in Rosicrucian teachings on this, is reminding one, it's not meant to supplant traditional medicine, but something that supports the healing process, and very often can address things before they get to the point that one needs to take more severe measures to counteract states of disharmony that might come in our bodies. But it also allows us to help relieve certain kind of experiences that people have, might be headaches and other things of this nature. that one can do. So the basic tenet of the Rosicrucian approach is, look, there's energy that is in our bodies, that we can direct this energy through our hands. And generally speaking, we look at the kind of the index, the thumb, the index finger, and the middle finger as being where this nerve that kind of connects into these three fingers is one of the best means of directing this energy, particularly when they're directed, to help in someone else's body or to apply it to your own body, etc. And again, these are gone into quite thoroughly in the sixth degree of the Rosicrucian studies. So, that's our kind of basic idea of terms of Rosicrucian, that there's a healing energy that's coming from radiating from our hands. I would say what's kind of fascinating also about this assertion, right, and these three fingers being kind of so important, is that if you look at a number of religious iconography, religious figures, right, or you look at figures of the Buddha, or figures in meditation, but very often these three fingers, the thumb and the index and the middle finger, are kind of put together and basically emphasized. Similarly, for those of you like myself who grew up in a Roman Catholic tradition, was very interesting in that ritual of the Mass, as it's called in Catholicism, and I guess Eastern, and as well as the Roman Catholic traditions, that when you come to what they call the consecration of the Eucharist, which is this notion there of taking a piece of a wafer, typically a very thin kind of bread-like wafer, and through certain prayers and actions of transmuting that into the quote-unquote body and blood of Jesus. Whether one takes that literally or symbolically, but this notion that one can physically change something and through it transmit a spiritual energy, not only to it, but through it. And what's very interesting about it, having been an altar boy way back in the day, is it is, again, these three fingers that the priest holds exclusively in touching this Eucharist, this bread, it's part of it, right? So these three fingers again. So there's something, there's something to it, but now I want to show you some science that kind of backs up what clearly the Rosicrucian order has been saying for a very long time prior to science beginning to kind of recognize these things. So where you see this kind of in fairly widespread use and drawing upon this, pretty widespread drawing upon this fact, is something called therapeutic touch, which is done in the nursing profession now. And you can Google it and see lots about it. So therapeutic touch basically is asserting that through energy radiated by kind of trained practitioners, and some nurses will get training in this as well as others, that they can alleviate symptoms, pain, other things like this in patients. And the beauty is that there's studies, again, for those of us who like some science, so with our mysticism, studies have shown increased vitality in treated subpopulations of and seedlings in comparison with control. So why is that really of interest, or special interest? Is because cell colonies are not susceptible to the placebo effect, right? They don't know, where a human being can say, well, it's a placebo effect. Give a person a sugar pill because of the power of the mind, which is another Rosicrucian point of view, but the power of the mind can affect the body. So, it's really suggestion, the placebo effect, but cell colonies and enzymes and seedlings actually don't know what you're talking about. When you're talking about the placebo effect, they're just there, and they when they're subjects to this, subjected to this in studies and control groups studies, they show some increase in activity based on a particular parameter that's being measured. So it's in the studies treatment because some variation of a historical technique known as laying on of hands, right? So you go back to ancient thousands of years ago, right? This notion, or modern nursing calls it therapeutic touch. So, I mean, again, thousands of years, humans have known about this, right? They've known about it through direct experience. Again, unfortunately, a lot of our scientific kind of brothers and sisters, just wound up, brought up in a very, unfortunately, somewhat arrogant mindset initially because of what is kind of induced sometimes through their training. to deny this experience, but now actually they're beginning to their satisfaction, demonstrated in the lab. So it's sort of a "I told you so" kind of thing. But what's really interesting for us, we can do it very practically ourselves. There's an exercise you're asked to do, an experiment exercise you're asked to do very early in the Rosicrucian studies, and we generally refer to it as magnetizing water. So it's the one where you're asked to take a glass of water, kind of, fresh, cool water, hold it in one's hand, do some breathing exercise, some concentration exercises, etc., and holding it, in a grip by one's hands, and then doing that for a few minutes, and then drinking the water. And depending on, perhaps what your experience has been with this exercise, sometimes it's a matter of practice and so on, of being able to direct this energy through one's hands and to increase its strength. But I think many folks can assure you, including myself, that it really does work. I mean, it's an interesting effect. So that's this technique. So, okay, those of us who are very scientifically oriented were like, hey, and this includes, actually, there's a wonderful Rosicrucian member years ago named George Belletza, and some of his articles appear in old Rosicrucian Digest, which are likely up on the English Grand Lodge America's website, when they did something called Mind Quest, and there was scientific experiments that were done out in San Jose in the RCUI laboratories, and so and eventually, one of the scientists involved in this type of work, not the scientist, this particular one, but he was cited that being able to measure some changes in the nature of the water, and actually, what was interesting, I found a more recent study in 2015 done by a number of professors, and as it mentions here, the infrared spectra alteration, kind of in water, let's say water molecules and water proximate to the palms of therapeutic practitioners. But what that simply is saying, with a lot of kind of fancy words that used in science for specificity purposes. So infrared, which is that area of the spectrum of light, kind of below our visual kind of senses. The spectra, which is they're like a spectrum, that part of the infrared spectrum, which is part of the larger light spectrum. The alteration in water proximate nearby, in proximity, excuse me, to the palms of therapeutic practitioners. Okay, those are the kind of the nurses, et cetera, that were trained in therapeutic touch. As it says here, through standard techniques, and by the way, this was published in a journal, through standard techniques of infrared spectrophotometry. So there's something called grading spectrophotometers, and they kind of shoot a little laser light kind of through things, and it breaks up the spectrum depending on the chemical, the molecular state of the sample that's being examined. So through a standard technique of infrared spectrophotometry, sterile water samples in randomly selected sealed vials, right, so good science, evidence alteration of infrared spectra after being proximate nearby to the palms of the hands of both practicing and non-practicing therapy practitioners, each of whom employed a personal variation of the laying on of hands or therapeutic touch processes. So basically, it was a pilot study with 14 cases, including 14 practitioners and 14 recipients. So the first hypothesis that a variation in the spectra of all 84 treated spectra compared with the 57 control spectra would be observed in the certain range of kind of infrared range was confirmed. In this case, the difference that they said there would be a significant variation, that probability equals 0.02, means 2 chances out of 100 that this would have happened by chance. And the normal standard in scientific research is 5 chances in 100, basically 0.05. So this is better than your normal scientific level quality of evidence. And they say the authors believe that the most representative evidence of the effect appeared in the sample group treated by versus the calibration control. So basically the sample, the other not affected or kind of held samples, was using a zinc selenide laser. And in that case, because you had a much stronger effect when they were measuring it using a zinc selenide laser, of 4/10,000s. 4 chances out of 10,000 it was due to probability, just to random chance. So really good, really hard, really high level of confidence level, as they say in science, of the result of the data. So here you have science pointing out, and basically what happens is you get a difference in hydrogen bonds. The molecular bonds are different, and you can see here, basically it says, based on spectrophotometry, water in proximity to hands of the palms, and this is again the palms, which is, it has the fingertips around it as well, of therapeutic practitioners had a high concentration of linked hydrogen molecules known as dimers. And that's the same result that was found about really in 1980s, early 80s, by another investigator, that you found this thing of increased links of hydrogen molecules. So it works. It's not fantasy. When the order has told us and pointed this out to us about our own nature, right? It's just telling us about our own nature, right? That this is there, and there's the kind of very clear evidence of it. So anyway, we're going to now just do here's a little quick video, by the way, as it's kind of coming out of as you can see, I think it was a university, what is it, Arizona Nursing and Health Associates, right? Where they use this therapeutic touch. They teach it to folks in their clinical settings. I'm going to play this video.
My name is Jackie Kern. I'm a registered nurse and a therapeutic touch practitioner. Therapeutic touch is a healing modality developed in the 1970s by nurse researcher Dolores Krieger and natural healer Dora Coons. It's a contemporary interpretation of ancient healing practices in which the energy of a healer's hands is used to promote healing in another. Therapeutic touch is based on several assumptions. First, that energy fields surround all living things, and that the human energy field goes beyond skin boundaries. That the healthy human energy field is naturally symmetrical and balanced, and that unbalanced energy fields are associated with illness and illness symptoms. Therapeutic touch assumes that human energy fields can be transformed, and that unbalanced energy fields can be rebalanced, and thus health can be promoted. This is done through intentionally directed energy exchange between a healer's hands and the client's energy field. It is not invasive, and no untoward effects have been documented. In multiple studies, therapeutic touch has been documented to be effective in reducing pain and anxiety and promoting relaxation, all of which facilitate natural healing processes.
So keep in mind, later on in the studies, if you're kind of really recently been introduced to the Rosicrucian studies, there's much more in depth about this. I mean, much more, really greatly in depth. The whole degree is devoted to it. A bit, a couple of points out. What's also interesting, which we'll touch on a little bit, related a little bit to the Rosicrucian view regarding what they call absent healing, basically remote healing when you're not in proximity to the individual, which you will also learn about as you progress through the Rosicrucian studies. And it will relate to a little bit of what we're going to talk about now. This next topic's kind of about the kind of hardcore science around space and time and what's called quantum entanglement. So what we're going to do is I'm going to begin by looking if I can get that out of the way there. Spirit, energy, and vibration. So to me, this is one of the more fascinating concepts. And I remember when I first encountered it, well, what is this? It's nothing unlike anything else that kind of I think any of us were taught in school, at least likely up until perhaps young people taking physics classes since the year 2000s plus. But this notion that everything is simply this what Rosicrucians refer to as spirit energy and its rate of vibration. So it's a pretty profound, or let me say far-reaching and pretty bold assertion. because and it's, for better or worse, very much has traditionally been quite different than the view of modern Western science. So, but what's fascinating now, science catching up with it now, finally catching up with this. And you'll see, and again, I go back to this notion of how was this information realized thousands of years ago, before we had any of these tools. I mean, just think of the cosmic illumination and the potential of cosmic illumination, right, to reveal these mysteries of the universe, beyond where it takes 2,000 years to build the instruments up to go confirm it, right? And they're not even that, they're not there yet quite, right, for everything. So basing tenet Rosicrucian teachings in the first monographs that everything is everything is manifest is comprised of spirit energy. All things are distinguished by their individual rate of vibration, right? So I had to do a lot of fishing around for this here, folks, on YouTube, strain my eyes likely, looking for a fairly straightforward, no equations, kind of reference to this by folks who are quite reputable in their fields, very reputable in their fields. So here goes, and this is one of two on this subject. So let's see if we can get this to.
What is the universe really made of? What is truly fundamental in the reality that we perceive? The idea of particles, even the particles that I've talked about numerous times composing the standard model, is not what the universe is actually made of. The particles are fiction. They're convenient representations that are not really the best understanding of the universe today. The fundamental nature of the universe are not particles, but fields. These are fluid-like substances that can be perturbed, they can vibrate and experience excitations. These fields in nature are everywhere. You can't escape it. If you take a strong metal box and remove everything from it, all the gases, all the atoms, all the photons, what will be left in that box? This is what we think of as a vacuum, like the vacuum of empty space. But in fact, this vacuum is alive with fields, and they're constantly moving and changing. The Heisenberg uncertainty principle means that a quantum field cannot sit still. Instead, they're moving and vibrating and changing their value over time. This is a computer simulation of empty space. All the bubbles that you see popping and bursting are perturbations of empty space. Particles are constantly being created and destroyed in this emptiness. But these particles are really excitations of fields that pervade all of space. What you can see in the world around you are excitations of these fields. In fact, all you can see is really only the excitations of 4 of the fields. You can see photons or light, which are vibrations in the electromagnetic field. Electrons are vibrations in the electron field. Up quarks and down quarks make up the protons and neutrons in the nucleus of all atoms. They are vibrations in the up quark field and down quark field, respectively. Amazingly, everything that you can see around you, your phone, your desk, flowers and trees, the earth below your feet, everything is composed of just these 4 fields. But
So,
what is the universe?
So, all this vibration, that simulation where you saw like these pretty colored kind of blobs going in and out, that was actually created with extremely massive computers, and that is it slowed down billions of times, right? So this happens at such a phenomenal rate. Literally, that is billions of times. I mean, actually billions of times slowed down that representation of it. And these things are taking place kind of at the 1 to the the 10th to the minus 34th power. So we're talking about such infinitesimal kind of sizes to these things, and vibrating at just incredible speeds, rates of vibration. So now there's another related part of this, and it's called string theory. And some of you may have heard of string theory. And string theory is not, it's not in contradiction to what you just saw related to quantum field theory. It is kind of a little bit of a twist of quantum field theory. And there are people who are working to try to make these two things totally compatible. So this is on string theory. And the person who's teaching, who's presenting here, is actually a very prominent physicist at Columbia University. Let's see if I can, let's go in here.
What are the fundamental constituents that make up our world? What is all the matter in the universe made of? What theory provides a description of the physical properties of nature at the scale of subatomic particles? What theory best describes everything? Can there be a theory of everything? American theoretical physicist Michio Kaku is the author of several books about physics and has worked on research on quantum mechanics. He has a unique way of explaining things that make hard concepts such as quantum physics and string theory seem apprehensible to us mere mortals.
What I do for a living is string theory. That's my day job. And you see, string theory is a multiverse theory. So people say, first of all, what is string theory? String theory simply says that all the particles we see in nature, the electron, the proton, the quarks, what have you, are nothing but vibrations on a musical string, on a tiny, tiny little string. You know, J. Robert Oppenheimer, the creator of the atomic bomb, was so frustrated in the 1950s with all these subatomic particles being created in our atom smashers that he announced one day that the Nobel Prize in physics should go to the physicist who does not discover a new particle that year. Well, today we think they're nothing but musical notes on these tiny little vibrating strings. So what is physics? Physics is the harmonies you can write on vibrating strings. What is chemistry? Chemistry is the melodies you can play on these strings. What is the universe? The universe is a symphony of strings.
This is the mysterious world of quantum physics. As we explore the strange and fascinating phenomena of the subatomic world, where particles behave in ways that defy our everyday understanding of reality, we will oversimplify these concepts, and hopefully you will forgive us for doing so. Because there is nothing harder to understand in science than quantum physics. As Richard Feynman once said, if you think you understand quantum mechanics, you don't understand quantum mechanics. At the heart of the quantum world lies the atom, the building blocks of matter that were once thought to be indivisible. But as physicists delved deeper into the atomic world, they discovered that particles don't behave like the everyday objects we encounter. In the quantum world, particles exist in a cloud of probability. They can be in two places at once and have a mysterious connection that Einstein called spooky action at a distance. To make things even more bizarre, particles seem to be influenced by the observer, as if they are aware of being watched. But that's not all. String theory takes us even deeper into the mysterious world of subatomic particles. According to this theory, particles are not tiny dots, but tiny strings that vibrate at different frequencies, creating the variety of particles that make up our universe. It's fascinating to think that thousands of years ago, ancient Greek philosophers such as Democritus attempted to understand the atomic world using reason and logic.
You know, Pythagoras was a rival of Democritus. Democritus talked about atoms 2,000 years ago, and Pythagoras said, no, music is the language of the universe. So he looked at a lyre string and said, look at the vibrations. Each vibration corresponds to a musical note. The universe is music. The universe is created by vibrating things. Each vibration corresponds to a note. He went to a blacksmith where there were long bars of metal, and they were clanging these bars of metal. He realized that the longer the metal, the lower the note. There's a relationship between the length of the object, its strength, and the note. And then he looked at a lyre string, and he said, the longer the lyre string, the lower the note. And then he said, this is the universe. What explains the diversity? What paradigm is rich enough to explain the diversity of the entire universe? Atoms, but what makes atoms different? And then he said, it's music. But then they never went anywhere, because of course the atomic theory wasn't created for another 2,000 years. But finally, with the atomic theory, we now have subatomic particles. But why do we have so many subatomic particles? They're nothing but musical notes on a tiny, tiny little vibrating string. So this is the electron. vibrates this way. This is a quark. This is a neutrino. So why do we have so many particles in the particle zoo? They're nothing but vibrations on a tiny string.
So there's kind of the modern now scientific awareness of basically vibration underlying all of manifestation. And quantum field theory, which is they're quite interesting, fascinating subject, obviously on its own, combined with string theory, really just speaks exactly to what the Rosicrucian teachings have asserted since the first monograph you received. Right. So, it just is fascinating, the reality of these things now. And so perhaps we shouldn't be surprised. Some people would have said it's the destiny of humankind, right, to know itself. And that includes knowing the world that we live in, because it really is only known through the eyes of self, right? Mind decides its dimension, right? It is us. So it's not unreasonable that it's within our destiny to know this, though the journey clearly has been long. So, as I said, I guess the Oracle of Delphi, know thyself. So, so let's look into another interesting subject that Rosicrucian teachings bring up, which is kind of, I won't call it controversial because we don't like controversy about these things per se, but it's surely, again, kind of radical, right? And that is the notion of time, the concept of time being an illusion, right? So we're told right at the beginning of the teachings, it's like early monographs, the Rosicrucians state that time is an illusion, a subjective experience, right? Huh? Really? And then we're given some further things to think about. Define time from a Rosicrucian point of view is generally very often referred to as defined as a duration of consciousness, right? The duration of consciousness. So when we're preoccupied, we don't notice the passage of time. When we're asleep, we don't even register time in any conventional sense of the word. As we age, right, time appears to pass more quickly. Time can go slowly, time can go quickly, right? So time is not this thing that we think of it as these kind of time is an experience, so to speak, as compared to something very concrete. Of course, our minds, our brains, and how our brains operate, it says, well, no. Time is like so-and-so. But that is really due to the limitation of our consciousness and our awareness, or in our apparatus. Linked to this assertion, right, is that the past, present, and future all exist simultaneously. And it's our objective consciousness that is limited in its perception, right? So that's why mind assigned at dimension can mean so much in this way, because the mind, our brains, which kind of so much shape, quote unquote, the mind. And I'm not talking about awareness. Awareness is different, right? But the mind kind of is this identity and all these other kind of things that are shaped by it. Would say, well, this is all there is, but it is simply reflecting the limitations of it. So we want to now actually, and here's Einstein's general theory of relativity demonstrates that the past, present, and future exist simultaneously. So this is, you just deal with serious physicists, hardcore theoretical physicists, etc. at the greatest universities in the world. They're going to all tell you the same thing. Even though you go, huh? I can't believe that. How is that so? Right? But they won't tell you the same thing. And in this case, actually, something I want to point out to you, and we'll come back to this right after this video that you're about to see. And actually, this video is by the Columbia professor. The other gentleman was not from Columbia. I forgot. I think he's like Stanford on the West Coast. Here's to me one of the things that I like to reflect on. So when we look at the sun, we look up at the sun, and we see the sun, and we say, the sun is out now. But the sun we're looking at is actually the sun as it was 8 minutes ago. But it takes 8 minutes for the light 93 million miles away of the sun to reach us. So we're looking at the sun as it was 8 minutes ago. And that what we're seeing is in our present. Oh, the sun is out now. That's our present, right? But it's actually the sun's past. The sun still exists. It's in the future, right? So watch this video, think about that a little bit, and this video is actually quite good. Although I got to say, I watched it a few times when I first encountered it to, follow it through. But I think you'll still get a lot out of it even on the first time viewing, and you can find it online. So here we go. This is the gentleman, Brian Greene, just a phenomenal scientist, major theoretical physicist up at Columbia, but also just very good at articulating in very lay language these very kind of deep and advanced scientific concepts. So let's see if I can get this to go.
This experiment was carried out in 1971 when scientists flew an atomic clock around the world and then compared it to one on the ground. As Einstein predicted, the two clocks no longer agreed. They differed by only a few hundred billionths of a second, but very real proof of motion's effect on the passage of time.
Einstein's theory has been tested again and again and again, and it all hangs together. It really forms the basis for the way we understand much of the way nature works.
These effects, which used to be considered sort of obscure and very small, are very in your face with today's technology.
With the discovery of this unexpected link between space and time, Einstein realized that the two could no longer be thought of as separate things. Instead, space and time are fused together in what came to be called space-time.
Einstein unified the idea of space with the idea of time into this four-dimensional structure called space-time.
And this fusion of space and time would lead Einstein to perhaps the most mind-bending realization of all. The sharp difference we see between past, present, and future may only be an illusion. In our day-to-day lives, we experience time as a continuous flow. But it can also be useful to think of time as a series of snapshots or moments. And everything that happens can be thought of as the unfolding of moment after moment after moment. And if we picture all moments or snapshots lined up, every moment here on Earth, every moment of Earth orbiting the sun, and every moment throughout the entire universe, we would see every event that has ever happened or will ever happen. Every location in space and each and every moment in time. From the birth of our universe at the Big Bang, some 14 billion years ago, to the formation of stars in the Milky Way galaxy, to the creation of Earth 4.5 billion years ago, to the time of the dinosaurs, to events happening on Earth today, like me working in my office. Thinking about space-time like this led Einstein to overturn our everyday picture of past, present, and future. To get a feel for this, you have to think about the seemingly simple concept of now. For me, a list of things that I consider to be happening right now might include the tick of noon on my office clock, my cat just now jumping from the windowsill, things happening far away, like a pigeon in Venice taking flight at this very moment, a meteor just now hitting the moon, and the explosion of a star at the far reaches of the universe. These and all other events that I think are happening at the same moment in time but in different regions of our universe, make up what I intuitively think of as now. You can picture them as lying on a single slice of space-time. Let's call it a now slice. Common sense would say that you and I and everyone else will agree on what's happening or what exists right now, moment after moment after moment. That is, we would all agree on what lies on a given now slice. But Einstein showed that, strangely, when you take motion into account, this common sense picture of time goes out the window.
You see what I mean? Think of space-time as a loaf of bread. Einstein realized that just as there are different ways to cut a loaf of bread into individual slices, there are different ways to cut space-time into individual now slices. That is, because motion affects the passage of time, someone who's moving will have a different conception of what's happening right now. And so they'll cut the loaf into different now slices. Their slices will be at a different angle.
That person who's moving will tilt the knife, will be carving out these slices at a different angle. They won't be parallel to my slices of time.
To get a feel for the bizarre effect this can have, imagine an alien here in a galaxy 10 billion light years from Earth, and way over there on Earth, the guy at the gas station. Now, if the two are sitting still, not moving in relation to one another, their clocks tick off time at the same rate, and so they share the same now slices, which cut straight across the loaf. But watch what happens if the alien hops on his bike and rides directly away from Earth. Since motion slows the passage of time, their clocks will no longer tick off time at the same rate. And if their clocks no longer agree, their now slices will no longer agree either. The alien's now slice cuts through the loaf differently. It's angled toward the past.
Since the alien is biking at a leisurely pace, his slice is angled to the past by only a minuscule amount. But across such a vast distance, that tiny angle results in a huge difference in time. So what the alien would find on his angled now slice, what he considers is happening right now on Earth, no longer includes our friend at the gas station or even 40 years earlier when our friend was a baby. Amazingly, the alien's now slice has swept back through 200 years of Earth history and now includes events that we consider part of the distant past, like Beethoven finishing the Fifth Symphony.
Even at a relatively slow speed, we can have actually tremendous disagreements on our labeling of now, what happens at the same time, if we're spread out far enough in space.
And if that's not strange enough, the direction you move makes a difference too. Watch what happens when the alien turns around and bikes toward Earth. The alien's new now slice is angled toward the future. And so it includes events that won't happen on Earth for 200 years. Perhaps our friend's great-great-great-granddaughter teleporting from Paris to New York. Once we know that your now can be what I consider the past, or your now can be what I consider the future, and your now is every bit as valid as my now, then we learn that the past must be real. The future must be real. They could be your now. That means past, present, future, all equally real. They all exist.
If you believe the laws of physics, there's just as much reality to the future and the past as there is to the present moment.
The past is not gone, and the future isn't non-existent. Past, the future, and the present are all existing in exactly the same way.
Just as we think of all of space as being out there, we should think of all of time as being out there too. Everything that has ever happened or will happen It all exists.
From Leonardo da Vinci laying the final brushstroke on the Mona Lisa, to the signing of the Declaration of Independence, to your first day at school, to events that, from our perspective, are yet to happen, like the first humans landing on Mars. With this bold insight, Einstein shattered one of the most basic concepts of how we experience time. The distinction between past, present, and future, he once said, is only an illusion, however persistent.
So, pretty rich. What I want to help you, another way of looking at this. This is a guy named Peter Ouspensky, who was a disciple or student of Gurdjieff, a Russian mystic. So Ouspensky wrote a number of books, and he had a very interesting kind of analogy or metaphor for the notion of time and now. And I tried to do some justice to it by laying out here on this what is a ruler. And his point was that the whole ruler exists. Our consciousness is the kind of little blue triangular arrowhead there, which is right now like 18 approximately. And that's what we perceive as the now. What we used to perceive previously, we call the past, and what we will eventually perceive, we call the future. But the whole ruler exists right now. It's the limitation of finite nature of our consciousness that makes us realize it in these kind of fragmented ways. The direction of time being, as you can see from where the arrows are. Another example, and this one is not Ouspensky, and it's a little bit more mundane, and it's a pizza pie. Right, there you go. So if you imagine the whole pie exists, right, we kind of perceive a tiny little piece of the pie at a given moment. And we think that's the now. But the whole pie exists. And actually, a better analogy that I found along the way also was looking at like a vinyl record. For those of us who are old enough to know what vinyl records actually are and how they worked. Well, the needle on the record player may be playing a particular note or melody at a given moment of a song or part of a song, but the whole song already exists. It's on the record. It's just that we only have a realization of where that needle's rested at that moment, right? That's what we realize as kind of the now and the sound. But the whole symphony, great album by Beyonce, whomever, right, is all there now. So anyway, those are things about the simultaneity of time, which is in our monographs. It's put forward, and it is science as it is, presently understood. So we kind of got to get a little used to it. There's some interesting things that kind of spring off of it. In this case, kind of referring to a little bit of the mystical concepts of time. And many of us who, if you read kind of stuff in this general thing of mysticism, you likely came across the term the Akashic Records. And you can look at Wikipedia, which is what I did for everyone. And here's what Wikipedia says. It says the Akashic Records are a compendium of all universal events, thoughts, words, emotions, and intent ever to have occurred in the past, present, or future, in terms of all entities and life forms, not just human. So mystics have talked about for forever the Akashic record, which is this all of this knowledge, everything that has taken place, as well as what will take place, all being accessible to consciousness if one is able to reach that level of consciousness or encompass that level of consciousness. What's interesting, and you saw with Brian Greene's video we just saw, right? He's saying all of this exists, the past, present, all exist. That's the Akashic Records. It's been in this concept, and I think the Akasha comes from Sanskrit terms. It's been around a long time, this idea, right? Also, it kind of, when you look at clairvoyance, right, where people have premonitions of the future, clairvoyance, etc., right? It's them seeing into the future that is. Now, there's likely a whole 20 books or something, all of us should read on what's that mean around free will, but it's a whole nother topic, which is quite interesting itself. So I just thought we would look at the mystical concept of time. And then lastly, I want to touch on something called quantum entanglement, and we're almost at the end here. And because a lot of the other things that the Rosicrucian teachings assert are really now quantum entanglement, this aspect of quantum physics, right? Something called quantum entanglement, which is, a wonderful, fascinating element of quantum physics. So I'm going to play a very short video by this guy, and because it kind of, I was looking for a 60-second description of quantum entanglement, and this, I think, kind of does it. See if I can get this going here.
Quantum.
Oops, let's go back and get it going again. No. I'm gonna get it this time, don't worry. That didn't do it. Okay, try again.
Quantum entanglement is one of the weirdest phenomena in physics. It's when two particles become connected in a way that their states are linked together no matter how far apart they are. Imagine two particles, say electrons, which are entangled with each other. If one particle is measured and found to be spinning in one direction, then the other electron will always be spinning in the opposite direction, even if it is on the other side of the universe. At the moment of entanglement, the two particles become one system, and their properties are intrinsically linked, even though there is no apparent physical connection between them. This may sound like science fiction, but it is proven experimentally many times over, including one experiment which involved two entangled particles separated by 1200 kilometers. In fact, Albert Einstein called this phenomenon spooky action at a distance because it seems to violate the laws of classical physics.
So this quantum entanglement likely is the physics behind a number of phenomena that the Rosicrucian teachings present to us, tell us to explore, make use of, etc. Right, which traditional modern science disregards, wants to reject because they have no mechanism to explain it. And one of the major problems with it, with a lot of the phenomena like telepathy and other things of this nature, is what they call non-locality. They can't see a causal connection between the two things, where you push this and that pushes that. And secondly, it seems to disregard the ideas of the limitation of the speed of light. Matter of fact, that's one of the problems for people who have a very traditional view in the classical part of science, for the non-quantum physicists, is that the demonstrations they show this quantum entanglement in conventional ways might be said to violate the notion that the speed of light, c, and c equals mc squared, kind of the famous equation, is an absolute constant and a speed that nothing can travel faster of. And of course, they get into a thing of saying no information can, and they obviously have a lot of things they have to work around to deal with the fact that quantum entanglement shows two particles traveling in opposite directions at the speed of light, both of them, right? And somehow being in connection, and they're both going away from each other at the speed of light, which means that if there was communication going on in a traditional way, it would have to be going twice the speed of light to kind of make up for the other one going in the opposite direction at the speed of light. So that would, but what seems to be they've not been able to find it outside of these things, angle connection, and as they stay entangled, regardless of the distance and regardless of the speed of limitation of the speed of light. So as the gentleman just related, this issue of non-locality seems to violate the classical understanding of the physical universe of causality, right? But they've proven this entanglement over and over and over and over again. People are total skeptics, hard-bitten scientists. So it's making them have to rethink how they thought about the world in existence. Einstein initially referred to it before it was really proven in laboratories. He called it spooky action in the distance because, how is this happening, right? But in this case, Einstein was mistaken. It does take place, and it's again been corroborated many, many, many times. But if you look at telepathy as an example, right, we look at how do we attune with someone, right, and without any obvious medium for conveying, a thought, et cetera, to that, when I say obvious medium, that's recognized by science, somehow or another, we can transmit a thought to someone, or we can pick up a thought from somebody, right? Similarly with clairvoyance, right? So you get the issue of time, but also this notion of being able to remotely sense something that you're not there present for. And absent healing. So that's why I mentioned about absent healing. People would say, well, what's the mechanism? We don't see, any proximity here. Well, when you can, so there are scientists now who think that some of the phenomena we see around these type of things comes out of where through consciousness, individuals can become entangled temporarily or otherwise through consciousness. So something that's brought up in the Rosicrucian teachings, and it's kind of fascinating in terms of big implications of it, is contrasting the speed of thought versus the speed of light. Speed of light is 186,000 miles per second, and it doesn't go any faster, right? So if you've got to go halfway across the universe, right, it takes 4 bits, actually about 7 billion light years to do it. Billion, right, light years to do it, right? Or 7 billion years in effect, right? Where speed of thought is not constrained by distance, right? So this quantum entanglement, and those examples, actually have been other examples beyond what this gentleman showed in this very kind of that brief snippet, where they've taken things that are actually quite much more remote than the 1,200 miles apart. So anyway, those are some things that relate to our teachings, the Rosicrucian teachings that we're studying and looking at now, science kind of recognizing and I would say insightful wisdom of these teachings that we've been lucky enough to have access to and to benefit from. So anyway, with that, we're going to wrap. God bless. I hope this was, at least some use to someone, some way. So God bless and take good care. Thank you very much. So let it be.